it was very challenging, to say the least. You go through everything. I mean, the racism, the sexism, every ism that's out there, you're going through it. You have to learn how to develop a very tough skin, which is something that I had to learn in the profession. Hi, my name is Aishah Coleman. My company is AC Design and Development, and this is my Bronx story, but I'm here in Mount Vernon. All right, so my backstory is I was born and raised in the Bronx in 1970, at the time when the Bronx was considered the burnt out Bronx. My mom is from Lumberton, North Carolina. My dad was born and raised here in Harlem, New York. We grew up on one. I lived on 166 in Walton Avenue when it was still predominantly Jewish. In 1975, that's where we moved into the neighborhood. My journey to school, shopping was just passing a series of abandoned buildings because that was the Bronx, and we lived on 166 in Walton Avenue. I went to Manhattan Center for Science and Math High School, and I actually went there for computer science because this was in 1984 when computers was a big and upcoming thing, and my goal was to build and design computers. I always had a skill for art and drawing. I always wanted to do something big for my community and for my borough because I love my borough very much. When I took my first art class, my art teacher said, "You should look into architecture or civil engineering. You're really good at drawing." And so I did all the research that I needed to do and went to the library and learned more about architecture and design and civil engineering. And the determining factor between architecture and civil engineering was, I believe, chemistry. Wasn't that great in chemistry. So I said, you know what, I think I'll go on the architecture side. And my goal then, once I started learning more about the profession and what architects do and what designers do, I wanted to rebuild my borough. I wanted to be part of the movement of rebuilding the Bronx. And so I went to a local college, the City College of New York, School of Architecture, which I think is one of the best and greatest architecture schools in the nation. At the time in 1988, when I started, it was, I believe it was number 21 in the nation, and it was number three in the state of New York. New York, in terms of architecture, is the greatest city in the world, and just the architecture is, everybody comes here to learn about the architecture. Is one of the greatest metropolis by hands down. So I went to a local college and I learned about architecture, and by the time I graduated and got into the workforce, they started rebuilding my borough without me. So I'm like, okay, a little sad but happy that my borough was going through a transformation. And actually, till to this day, 2022, we're still going through a transformation, which is just astounding and just awesome. But being an African American young lady, young girl growing up in the borough, growing up and studying architecture, came with its own challenges. One, architecture wasn't a word that you heard in the black neighborhoods or in any type of minority neighborhoods. The funny story I tell people is that when I started college and people would ask my mother what I was going to school for, she couldn't say the word architecture, so she would say agriculture. And I would say, "Mommy, I'm not going to school to be a farmer. I'm going to school to be an architect, to learn how to design and build buildings." Because that just wasn't something that was taught to us in our community. Not knocking other professions, but you didn't hear architecture, you didn't hear engineering in our profession. If you heard construction, it wasn't carpenters, it was laborers or maybe a plumber. So for me to study architecture as a black woman, as an African American woman, it came with a lot of challenges because architecture is the white male's profession. Design or interior design is the white woman's profession. So here I am. I'm busting down doors or following the paths of those ahead of me, trying to make my mark in the industry. And it was very challenging, to say the least. You go through everything. I mean, the racism, the sexism, every ism that's out there, you're going through it. You have to learn how to develop a very tough skin, which is something that I had to learn in the profession. I used to be super sensitive, so anything that anybody would say, my feelings would get hurt. I would find some corner to go cry. And you just have to learn that if this is what you want to do, you have to develop a thick skin. And architecture is something that I love to do. I love designing. I love creating. For me, when I come into a project like this, I look at it, I always see what the end result's going to look like. So then I backtrack and say, okay, how do we get there? I look at it as a puzzle and putting all of the pieces together to create this beautiful design or this great layout. So I've been in this profession since 1993. That's when I graduated from college with my bachelor's degree in architecture. I'm still here. I still love it, even with all of the challenges from COVID, dealing with the building department, just clientele. I feel like this is what I was put on earth to do. When I get to a point where I don't like it anymore, then I have to find something else to do. And if I do that, it'll still probably be in the realm of design. It just might not be as meticulous as what I do now. But that's my story. I discovered that I loved planning and creating the concepts of building in high school. I did take, in my senior year, I took planning, a space planning class, and I took an architecture class. For the record, I went to Manhattan Center for Science and Math High School on 116th Street in Pleasant. So I had to big up to MS. Wait a minute. Oh my God, MCSM. So yeah, I loved my high school, and it was a science and math high school, so it was definitely geared for architecture and engineering. But when I took that space planning class, that's when I realized, yeah, this is exactly what I want to do. When I started becoming a teenager, and all teenagers, you decorate your room, but I went beyond just putting posters on my wall. I wanted to repaint it. I wanted to change out the layout. I wanted to create custom bookcases and things like that. So that was something that was always within me. When I got into high school, it started to come out a little more. And then definitely when I got into college, because I was learning more about the business and the profession, learning how to design, learning how to space plan, learning about paths of travel in your space, learning about natural light that comes in, door swings, how you function. That was the key thing that I learned in college that I use today. And most architects do, is how you function in your space. And one of the key things that we learned in college was form follows function. Once you identify how you function in your space, then the form starts to take shape. Then the furniture layout starts to take shape. The colors that you use, the furnishings, the cabinets, all of that starts to take shape once it's truly identify how you're going to function in your space. Architecture is a male-dominated profession, and yes, it is hard. It still is hard till this day for me as a Black woman, architect, designer in this profession. I still have to prove myself. And it gets cumbersome and extremely exhausting, because even with contractors that I've worked with over the years, I'm still having to prove myself. And I don't know if that's the male mentality, but it gets very cumbersome and very tiring. But I've learned to not let it affect me personally. I just say that they're donkeys or jackasses or whatever, just to get through the day. But every so often, there's always going to be a challenge, especially when we come onto a job site, when we're dealing with a new contractor that we never worked with. There's that very sometimes racial, stereotypical transition that we have to go through to get to a point where we're here for the good of the project. There's been situations when we've been dealing with building department personnel, like the plan examiners in some of the Westchester counties, and we had a situation in one county which I will not name, but every time that we met with the plan examiner, he came up with new objections that I felt was on purpose. I said to my partner Francine, I said, you know what? I think this guy's racist, and this is just something that I just felt in my core. I said that I'm going to remove myself from any meetings that we have with him because it's not about me. It's not about teaching him a lesson. It's not about proving that he's a racist. It's about getting this project approved for the client and is for the betterment of the project. And she couldn't understand. Francine is, well, I shouldn't say her name, but she's not black. But it was a lesson that I had to teach her that unless you're a member of the oppressed, you don't know what it means to be oppressed. And it's not always when they just come out and call you the N word or a B word or whatever. It's very subliminal. And I said racism is very seductive in a way because it seduces you to a point where you don't know that is happening, and you have to sit back and really recall what happened to know, oh wow, I'm being discriminated against, because it's not always obvious and it's not always overt. At the end, we ended up getting the project approved without me having to step away. But those are just some of the minor challenges, well, the few challenges that we've gone through to just dealing with a black woman in this profession that's male dominated.
Um, when did you know you wanted to mix both interior design and architecture, and that it would be a lucrative move for you?
All right, so I realized that I needed to mix architecture and interior design when I actually took my business full time. I worked in the private sector, I worked in the public sector, and at the height of the recession in 2009, I was let go on one of my projects because they didn't get the funding for the next project. And I was like scratching my head, like, okay, this is not cool. I was making a nice six-figure salary and now had to been reduced down to accepting unemployment, had a mortgage to make, utilities. So I said, okay, two trains are going to have to leave the station. Either I'm going to take my little part-time business and run it full-time, or I'm going to find another job. And the part-time businesses that became my full-time business, that's what took off and that's what kept going. And 12 years in is what has continued to sustain me. At the time, I was only offering kitchen and interior design and decorating because I didn't want to have anything to do with the architecture side of the business. It wasn't until I was offered a project to redesign an event space for a client, and we had to do the filings with the building department. And because my LinkedIn profile was still very active, the client knew I had the capabilities of doing both the design and the architectural services. And then that just started to take off through osmosis. It's not something that I was pushing or marketing heavily, but it was something that people knew that was my background. This is what I was doing, that I started getting referrals for the architectural. I decided to push both on the business end because I wanted to create a one-stop shop for clients where we came in and did the architecturals and then did the interiors, so they didn't have to bring in another person and minimize coordination and confusion. So basically you had your architect designer team and then you had the construction team, and it was easy for us to manage and coordinate as well as the clients in terms of payments and things that they have to make. So that's how I ended up merging the two together. The person that I look up to in the industry in terms of breaking down barriers is Roberta Washington. I had the honor of meeting her when I was in college. We was part of the Coalition of 100 Black Women Role Model Program, and we had the opportunity to meet her at her office. She being a black woman in this profession of all men, and what she's managed to accomplish and the barriers that she broke down. She paved the way for myself and other designers that came in behind her to do what we do today. How I decide if a project is a good fit for me and my company is the complexity of the project, the creativity of the project. If it's a project where we're just, I don't know, legalizing something that was already done, I mean, that's pretty standard. And we get a lot of projects like that. But if we're asked to come in and create something new, doing interior alterations, which are my favorites, I love doing interior alterations, then those are the great fit. Also, our relationship with the client. Once we meet with the client, get an idea of what it is that they want to do. If we feel that we have a synergy, then despite the project, we will continue to move forward with them. In terms of client involvement or working independently, you have to have client involvement. I did have one project where we had a condo unit in the West Village where there was no client involvement. It was just he said he needed his space to be designed. He was over in London. He was coming back to the States. He said, wow me. And we had a lot of fun with that project because he had a lot of artwork. So a lot of the design was based off and the colors was based off of his artwork. So he came home that Sunday. We're on pins and needles, like, okay, hope he likes it, hope he likes it. And then I got an email Monday morning, like, Aisha, wow, thank you so much. Your team did such a great job. So you have those projects where you work independently to be able to really push the envelope. And that project really enabled us to push the envelope. But I do like working with the clients because my goal is to make sure that we meet all of our clients' needs and we allow them to express themselves. And sometimes we push their envelope because they might be stuck on beige and we're like, no, add some more color. So we push the envelope there as well. But for us working with the clients, it's their reaction once everything starts to come together. All right, so the elements that define my style, I would say, are earthy things. I'm a May baby, so I love pastels and spring warm colors. So my inspiration comes from creating warmth and comfort for my clients. So even if it's a kitchen, we can still create warm and comfort by the color of the cabinets that you pick, the color of the flooring that you materials, the countertops, the backsplash, the wall colors. All those things can create warmth. I'm a firm believer that your home is your sanctuary. That's where you recharge your battery. That's where you leave all of, as you walk through the door, all of the problems of the world are left outside and you're able to be at peace. So for me as a designer, I draw creation from that, making sure I'm designing something that's going to create peace, comfort, and serenity for my clients. So when it comes to planning a budget, my main priority is the construction cost because that can eat up 2/3 of your budget. And it's really predicated on the type of work that the client is looking to do. So if we're going to do a kitchen design, if it's a kitchen design, you're looking at the construction, the kitchen cabinets, your countertops, and your appliances. Those are the four most expensive things that you're going to deal with when doing the kitchen design. So I always, when I meet with the client, I always ask them, what's your budget? Sometimes they might not know or they might be embarrassed to tell what their budget is. So then I'll create a budget for them. And I do a low, mid, high budget for them. So low end might be getting your cabinets from a big box chain store. High end might be doing custom cabinets. Midline might be doing standard stock cabinets, but not something that you're pulling off the shelf. And the same thing with all of the finishes. I I will say that in the 12 years of running my business, I've created a very long list of very well qualified contractors that I've worked with. So, based on the client's budget, I know which contractor to pull or which bin to pull from, knowing that this contractor specializes in this type of project. This one does more high end work. So, I know which contractor that's going to stay within the budget that my client needs. Key decor elements that would develop the elevate a room would be your accessories. Anybody can put a sofa, a love seat, a coffee table in a room. Is how you dress up those furniture pieces. What type of wall art are you putting in your room? What type of light fixtures, floor lamps, table lamps, your area rug, throw pillows, throws, blankets, your wall color. That can make a world of difference. So all of those elements come together to create one aesthetically pleasing room. And I would definitely say you have to decorate your walls. You can't leave them bare because they're naked. And when I equate that to a woman wearing earrings. When she puts on earrings, it enhances her face. When she doesn't have earrings, then her face is just plain. I mean, you see the natural beauty, but it's still plain. So earrings are an enhancement. So that's what wall decor and accessories do to a room. It enhances the space. In terms of trends when designing a room, I don't go with trends because trends are here today, gone tomorrow. I like to focus on classic designs, things that I know is going to last the test of time, especially when it comes to doing a living room, because living room furniture is expensive, or doing the dining room or doing the kitchen. So I don't want to trendy. You can spend all this money doing stuff that's trendy and then not like it next year. So if you stay with classic design, classic looks, you can always add the trends in terms of decor. It could be a throw pillow. It can be, a small table lamp. It can be a wall art, a canvas art that you get from your local store. So if it incorporates those colors of what's trending now, you can add those colors in without having to break the bank. I balance symmetry, patterns, textured when designing a room. Is I start with the floor plan. So the balance is going to come with what we have to place in that floor plan. So for example, if I am doing a living room, what's my focal point? Is my focal point going to be as soon as I walk into the room, that wall, or is it going to be an opposite wall? Sometimes a room already has a focal point. So then we design around that focal point, and or you can create a second focal point. So it really starts off with the bare bones of the room. What's going on in that room? If my focal point is the window, then everything then points towards that window, or it complements what's happening at that window. That's how you start to find your balance and your symmetry. I'm very symmetrical in my design for the most part. So I look at it as a seesaw. I don't want one side up, one side down. It has to be leveled on both ends. So it starts with the bare bones room. It starts with what's happening in the room. What's the focal point in the room? Do I need to create a focal point? And if I have to create one, then everything focuses around that new focal point, and that's how I create my symmetry and balance. The advice that I share when it comes to owning your own business is don't listen to the naysayers. If you're going to start your business and you're passionate about it, then do it. But talk to those who are already in the business doing it, or those who are already business owners. There's a lot of people who will lend their 2 cents and don't have a clue of what they're talking about, have not made any attempts to do it, and just want to tell you anything because they can. If you want to start your business, do your research. That's key. Learn about your industry. Learn about any licenses or insurance or permits that you need to get. Find out what agencies here in New York City, and there's a lot. I would name one, Department of Small Business Services, that can give you all of the clues that you need to, or tips that you need. If you get on NewYorkState.gov or NY.gov and you click on the button starting a business and you type in the type of business that you're looking for, the state will give you all of the information that you need. But the key thing to starting your business is do your research, make sure you do your homework, and don't listen to the naysayers. If you want to get into interior design and architecture, I say that it's never too late. You don't have to necessarily have gone to college for architecture. You can always take an architecture class or course. You can take an interior design class or course. I used to teach interior design and decorating at for Kingsborough Community College as part of their continuing ed program. So it's never too late. You know, if you want to start in the world of interior design and decorating, start with designing your own space and take pictures of it. And you can post it on Instagram or Facebook. You can get feedback from it. You can design family and friends rooms at no cost to them, just so that you can get your feet wet. But there's a whole bunch of classes you can take online or in person to learn the profession. In terms of architecture, there's architecture classes that you can take, like an introduction to architecture, but for the most part, it would require a 4-year degree.